Hello and welcome to South Asia Focus. I'm Maithripala. Sri Lanka and China have had a good relationship, especially during the rule of former Sri Lankan President Mahinda Rajapaksa. Now the current President of Sri Lanka, Maithripala Sirisena, seeks to further strengthen ties between the two nations. Also, China is looking to play a greater role in Afghanistan, more so as Afghanistan's President Ashraf Ghani looks to rebuild his war-torn country. To know more on this, we talked to Srikant Kondapalli, a professor of Chinese studies at Jawaharlal Nehru University in Delhi. Here's a report. Sri Lanka's President Maithripala Sirisena arrived in Beijing on March 27 and met his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping and Chinese Premier Li Keqiang. His six-day visit was aimed at resolving the deadlock over China's biggest investment project in the island, which the new Sri Lankan administration had suspended over allegations of wrongdoing. Xi and Sirisena were given the guard of honor in the Great Hall of the People before formally holding talks. The two leaders also signed 4 agreements on infrastructure and healthcare development.
President Sirisena's visit to China recently is a major development because prior to his visit, Prime Minister Modi visited Sri Lanka. And in September last year, President Xi Jinping visited Sri Lanka, and Sri Lanka accepted the Maritime Silk Road concept. So for Sri Lanka, which is looking for more economic development and investments from abroad, these two visits are quite significant. Prime Minister Modi as well as President Xi Jinping's visit to Sri Lanka. So soon after Prime Minister Modi's visit, President Sirisena went to Beijing, and in this he concluded several agreements related to investments. Already before, China had promised several investments to the tune of nearly $10 to $15 billion cumulatively in the next 5 years, about $52 billion of investment.
In September last year, Xi Jinping, the first Chinese president to visit Sri Lanka in 28 years, had inaugurated a $1.4 billion project for luxury real estate development in Colombo port city. Also important, as according to China, it's an important part of its maritime Silk Route plan linking China with Europe via the Indian Ocean. But ever since it has been announced, the project has been encountering some hurdle or the other. The Rajapaksa administration faced allegations of wrongdoings. To make matters worse, environmentalists also protested against it, saying it would severely damage the country's whole southwestern coastline. The review of this port city project, which was ordered by Sirisena when he came to power earlier this year, led to a strategic impasse between the two countries, which China hopes would be resolved during Sirisena's visit.
They plan to invest in Sri Lanka. However, during the transition period between Rajapaksa and Sirisena, there were some discussions within Sri Lanka that some of the Chinese aided projects in Sri Lanka have environmental issues like in the Colombo port and in Norocholai thermal power plant, or in some of the expressways and railway projects. They have some environmental concerns, so they have put on hold for the time being the Chinese aided projects in Sri Lanka. So there was a controversy regarding this. However, about 3 weeks ago, the Sri Lankan foreign minister visited Beijing, and he expressed the Sri Lankan interest that these projects will not be stalled, and actually Sri Lanka is looking for investments from China. So during the current President Sirisena's visit to Beijing, it is clear that the Sri Lankans are requesting China to invest more in the projects. Also, the second important thing is that the Chinese have now converted these investments as part of the Maritime Silk Road project. As was clear in the recent period, the Maritime Silk Road has become the main flagship program for China, and they have allocated several funds, billions of dollars of funds. To start with, they have the China-Pakistan Economic Belt project in which they have announced some $45.6 billion of investment in Pakistan, as well as for the Silk Road Fund, which can be utilized for other countries like Sri Lanka. So the investment profile is increasing in this region for China.
China, which has invested millions of dollars in Sri Lanka's infrastructure since the end of the civil war in 2009, has on its part defended the port project, saying it was in accordance with local laws and any termination would put off foreign investors. Meanwhile, China is keen to garner a foothold in war-torn Afghanistan, especially after President Ashraf Ghani came to power in Kabul. Afghans think that China's economic and diplomatic support can help their nation trounce economic and security challenges after the withdrawal of NATO troops from the country. In fact, right after coming to power, President Ghani undertook a visit to Beijing to further strengthen ties. Ghani had earlier said that he saw Afghanistan as a center for regional trade and investment and that he hoped relations with China would get stronger.
Afghanistan is a close neighbor of China and shares about 96 kilometers of border with Xinjiang in China. So from the Chinese point of view, the borders are very crucial because the Chinese suspect that there are about 1,000 Uyghurs trained by the Al-Qaeda and hence they have certain say in the Afghan related developments. So as the International Security Assistance Force started moving away from Kabul from last Christmas, there has been a recent move by China to take more initiative in the Afghan affairs. That's partly because of the Uyghur related political violence in Xinjiang, which is kind of challenging the internal security issues in China. As is evident, last year China had established a National Security Commission mainly to tackle the internal security issues. The third main reason why China is interested in the Afghan affairs is the investment profile and opportunities. It is said that Afghanistan is sitting on something like $3 trillion worth of raw materials like iron ore, copper and other resources. So China wants to exploit some of these resources in Afghanistan and had invested heavily in the Ainak copper mine and in the dam construction projects and in the Amu Darya oil wells, where Chinese petroleum companies have now started drilling for energy resources in this part of Afghanistan. So these three main issues were crucial for China in terms of Afghanistan. However, the situation in Afghanistan is not conducive for all these, and hence last year China hosted the Istanbul process for reconciliation in Afghanistan. The Afghan president's first visit abroad was to Islamabad and second to Beijing, indicating that he is looking for both Pakistan and China to stabilize the situation in Afghanistan after the election process has been initiated, and this is the main initiative he had taken.
China had for the most part not got involved in Afghanistan's geopolitical and internal affairs and had kept itself to an economic investor in the country's natural resource and energy sectors. But in the last 2 years, however, Beijing has aggressively sought to redefine its relations with Kabul. Former President Hamid Karzai was considered closer to India than China, but President Ghani inclining more towards China is good news for the Asian giant. Another point of interest which China has is the Afghan-China border. China is connected to Afghanistan by the slender Wakhan corridor. China says militants who want to set up a separate state called East Turkestan in its western Xinjiang region inhabit the region along the Afghan-Pakistani border. President Ghani has already stated that Afghanistan would not allow any activities that threaten China's security on Afghan territory. Xinjiang, home to more than 11 million Uyghur Muslims, is on the edge for the past many years over their dislike about increasing settlements of outsiders from other Chinese provinces. More on China's role in Sri Lanka and Afghanistan in the coming episodes. Thank you for watching South Asia Focus. China says militants who